asking for wisdom, asking for guidance, and asking for grace. These are troubling times. We have school board members who need prayer, need healing, need guidance. Mainly, we need to make sure we do what is right in your eyes for the students and the citizens of Stokes County. For it's in your name we pray. Amen. Okay, it's officially called to order at 6:02 p.m. Dr. Rice, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes, sir. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. All right, approval of the agenda. So that everybody is aware, we have, because closed session was moved to 5:30, we have made a few amendments to the agenda under action items for personnel. We also have, we have 3 items under personnel that have been moved to action. They are items B, C, and D. And do I have Ms. Tedder, I believe in the conversations you wanted to add a discussion on COVID-19 under discussion?
Yes, sir. Either we can roll it into G or make H separate.
I'm fine with rolling it into G if Dr. Rice is prepared to do so.
Yes, sir. That is fine. I've already made the notes on my paper for the official minutes and all that.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Also, we would like to add a discussion item H, a discussion of school nutrition grants. Kind of self-explanatory, but we'll explain it more when we get there. But 2 school nutrition grants that are available that we're pursuing.
Okay. All right. Pending no other amendments to the agenda, do I have a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve. Cheryl Knight.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Knight. Do I have a second?
Second, Pat Messick.
Thank you, Ms. Messick. Ms. Knight, how so do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Messick?
Aye.
Ms. Tedder?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Okay, discussion, sitting there, do we not have any public comments?
Not for the work session. That will be the second
Well, that's
meeting.
right, this is June 1st. I keep thinking this is the end of May. My bad. Perfect. All right, approval of the agenda is done. Discussion. West Oaks High School CTE building update. Ricky Goins, you are the man. Hook me up.
Yes, board members, Dr. Taylor and Richie and I, we met over there last Friday with the architect and contractor. They still just a little bit behind schedule, but they still feel like they can have the building completed in mid-July. I took some pictures and shared with the board on Saturday. They've got the walls framed up for the classroom, the restrooms. The HVAC was in there working on Friday, and they expected all trades to be in there working this week. Any questions?
So when you say HVAC was working, you mean they were working on putting it in, not it was actually functioning, working, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Ms. Knight, do you have any questions?
What is their estimated completion date or schedule?
They're still telling us mid-July they'll be completed with that project.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Messick, any questions?
No questions. Just good job that you're going on with that now while we're still out, and thank you for the job you've done.
Okay, Ms. Tedder?
No questions. I just really appreciate the update, and the pictures are very helpful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hey, Ricky, we've talked enough, so I'm not going to bore the rest of the audience. I commend you on a job well done. Everything seems to be progressing great. So if you have anything, I'm sure you'll call me.
I will.
All right. King Elementary door bids. Why do I think I'm still going to see your little face on my computer screen?
Well, we had the bid opening on May the 21st. We had 3 bidders. There should be a bid tabulation in your board packet. I would recommend awarding the bid to H.G. Strickland for $54,860. There was $100,000 budgeted for that project. The architect's going to be around $8,000. But I would just kind of hold that money back for contingencies till the project's complete. And then if anything left over, we maybe just use it for an emergencies for next year.
Yeah. We need a rainy day fund.
Yes, we do.
Ms. Knight?
No questions. Thank you, Mr. Goins.
Ms. Messick?
Okay, I'm fine with your report. Thank you.
Ms. Tedder?
What's the time frame for this project?
The contractor's telling us once we award the bid, some of the lead times is about 6 weeks to 8 weeks on some of the materials to get them all, and they're looking at about 3 weeks to complete it. I know this is a work session and we can't vote on it tonight, but could I get the board's consensus to go ahead and give the contractor the green light?
It is more than a work session. We have voting powers at all meetings now. So,
okay. Well, I'd recommend we move this to action agenda then.
Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion, Mr. Rogers. Cheryl Knight.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second that, Katie Tedder.
Okay, Ms. Knight, how so do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Messick?
Aye.
Ms. Tedder?
Aye.
I'll vote aye also, so that would be E in action, King Doors. CTE local application.
Hello, board members. I just wanted to give you an update of the career and technical education local application. It has changed drastically with the change from Perkins 4 to Perkins 5. And I wanted to let you know what the major components were so that you would be able to answer questions as those came to you. So the first place I will start is with those 3 major sections, and you're welcome to follow along on the slides within your packet. So before we had our own application system, this has now moved into the North Carolina CCIP program, which houses the grants. And I listed out for you what those components were within this. There were 21 total sections that we had to fill out with program measures, the 6 components of the comprehensive local needs assessment, and then we wrote out local narratives based on that information. This system also contains our budgets, assurances, and local pathways. So all of the pathways that we have, I had to list in there for review by our regional coordinator. I listed out the program measures for you on the next slide, and these apply for those students who meet the definition of a concentrator. So when you look, we have our graduation rate, academic proficiency in reading, mathematics, science. Then we have post-secondary placement. 4S1 is non-traditional program enrollment. 5S1, I did have a typo here. It should not say non-traditional program quality. That should only say attained, recognized post-secondary credentials. So we draw that out of our credentialing report, which I'll talk more on in just a moment. And then 5S4 is program quality. So this would be your state testing, and they are going to shift away in some areas. We're going to be piloting it next year, shifting away from the state testing and doing more of a project-based measure or problem-solving model for our students. That's not across the board. We'll still have some areas that have the 100-question test, but these are all the measures that they use to gauge our quality. On the next slide, I've listed for you our two-year averages for our local plan and where the state fell in those measures, just so you would have a reference point. As you see, the largest discrepancy from the state was in 2S3, but I will say that we are trending upward on that measure as well. When you look with the comprehensive local needs assessment, this was something that we were trained on all last summer. And for the first semester, all we did was collect data that would help us within this process. So I tried to be as transparent as possible with everyone. I got our master schedules information from North Carolina Careers for our regional area, and just laid out everything with our master schedules and what our pathways are, which businesses in the area are growing, which ones are not, and gave that information to our business advisory, to our guidance counselors. I met with every single CTE teacher at their home schools to go over that. Met with administrators. We did surveys with students. We did a random sampling there. And then we consistently met with representatives from Forsyth Technical Community College. And again, master schedules, courses offered, pathways, and then NC Careers to get our regional growth data. We went through all that information, and there was a document, and you'll see this under the CLNA continued slide. The CTE division gave us this comprehensive local needs assessment. It is a 38-page document. I took the questions and broke them out by the representative or group that would need to give us feedback within that. And when I met with them, I shared guiding documents with those questions, gave them the information to answer those questions, and let them provide that feedback to me to help get our comprehensive local needs assessment done and score out and find out what our greatest needs were. Through that process, looking at our local narrative strengths, we, as you know, we're a small and rural district, but the groups that we work with are very invested in seeing improvement. And I think you all have seen that from local businesses and economic development, that they are very interested in our school system and seeing our students be successful. One other area that showed up as a strength was a strong focus on professional development for CTE at the state and local level. With our CTE teachers, they are supported financially to attend the state level CTE conferences, and we are building more collaborative opportunities for them for next year as well. Another area that showed up as a great strength for us was in technical attainment, or the program quality measure. That has continued to be high and very strong for our county CTE programs. And a positive upswing that we have seen is within our student credentialing. Our credentialing numbers have increased annually, and part of that was the addition of the construction program, because there are lots of credentials within that program with the NCCER system for our students. One other strength that was noted was a wide variety of courses and pathways for the size of our school system. And as noted within the CTE Business Advisory Group, we are aligned with the growing industries. When we look at the, and I'd shared this website with you all at a previous meeting, when we look at NC Careers and look at our regional areas of growth, our pathways are matched up with that. So our students can tie into local and regional industry. Slide 6 talks about opportunities for growth. The areas that we were mainly looking at with this, after we completed the CLNA local narratives to address the needs, we saw that our career and technical service organizations could use improvements. That's a great opportunity for growth. We have some pockets that are strong with like our Future Farmers of America, but we can tie in to the state and national agencies more and give more opportunities for our students. So that was one thing that we would like to continue to increase. In high school, I think you all know David Martin, our CDC. He does an excellent job of maintaining business partnerships and matching students to the internships. But we would like to expand on the field trips and guest speaker opportunities outside of the high school as well. We'd like to grow opportunities for our middle school students to explore careers and to see those. Also, I had seen some success with our computer programming with Vic Tuttle, going over to London with high school students and letting them lead elementary students through and play with the spheros and get a little bit of a feel for some of the coding. I would love to see that expand more and show more of our elementary students maybe some time to work with the high school students and those teachers to see what pathways we offer at the high school. The other major area that we would like to improve on are our academic attainment scores, as listed in previous slides. All right, so when we talk about those actions, want to continue to improve our graduation rate in all areas of academic attainment. With that, the goal will be to focus on our data and do progress monitoring for our students and team problem solve around the academic issues that we are seeing. One byproduct of COVID-19, the remote learning that we're doing, is that we're going to have more opportunities. Our teachers are used to this, so it's going to be a little easier for us to hold our district level meetings and to draw teachers together to share in Google Meets like this and discuss what we're doing and build more collaborative efforts for growth within our programs. We are going to focus on MTSS improvements K-12 and then blueprint alignment with modifications within our OCS program. We are already looking at those, but we're going to continue to grow them. Very quickly, I'll just give you a small overview of the process that we've undergone. This really started last July at the summer conference as we reviewed this with our regional directors and started getting everything in for how to conduct the CLNA. We got the final documents to conduct that. These were reviewed and training occurred. Our region met monthly just to continue to improve and discuss the ways that we collect data from local businesses and the partners and stakeholders that we work with. The meetings were conducted with stakeholders by January, and then this plan development has been ongoing all year. This will occur again in the 21-22 school year. And then, of course, I will be looking at our growth towards meeting these goals and where our program measures come out next spring. And this whole process was aligned to match the federal requirements of Perkins 5. So this was the first year that we've undergone this process. And I think Michael would attest to the NC CCIP system can be a little fickle. What I did was I set up a Google Drive that matches up to components of this local application process and conducted all my documents within that so that when we undergo this process again, it should be much more fluid. And then just having the experience of going through it again or having gone through it before will improve the process for the second go round. So, board, I mainly just wanted to tell you what the major components were within this plan. I know that I've submitted this before, but that was through a totally different system with different program measures. And the next thing that will come about, there are assurances. The total document within this application was 127 pages. But there are the assurance pages and then a signature page for Dr. Rice and Mr. Rogers, you as the chairperson, for us to obtain these grant funds. So today I just want to give you the overview, and then for the future meeting on June 16th, I'll bring forth those assurances and that signature page for your review. Board, at this time, do you have questions for me regarding the local application for our CTE programs?
Ms. Knight?
Yes, Mr. Rose, thank you. It sounds like this has been quite the undertaking, but you've done a great job. And my question is, are you happy with the changes and the measure changes in this process compared to previous?
I am. To me, one of the biggest differences when we start looking at these program measures is that the CTE concentrator has been redefined. Used to, it was a 4-course concentration that they would have to do with a completer class. Now it is a 2 to 3 course sequence. I think it's great that we're going to have more students who get to be concentrators and who will be taking the work keys and possibly getting that credential. But also, it may dilute the numbers some. I think our numbers for concentrators will match more with the overall population than maybe it did in the past. But overall, I'm very pleased with the things that have taken place. The assessment piece is going to be a little different as well with the in lieu of credentials. If a course has an in lieu of credential, that will be the only program measure that we really have for that course. There will not be a state test. There will not be a project-based learning opportunity for them to be marked proficient. So that can also affect our numbers if there are credentials that we cannot afford. Also, we're looking at ways that we might be able to increase the funding streams to that as well, out of maybe some of our other
What's an example of a credential that we would not be able to afford, like right off? Is there one at the top of your list?
We have not done the one for drafting before,
Okay.
and it can get rather pricey. Also, success rate on that one has been extremely low in talking with some of the other districts, but that's the first one that comes to mind.
Okay. And then what can you think of other business partnerships or involvement that you would like to pursue?
One of the main ones that I have seen going with some of the other districts is, for example, when we look at FFA, Ms. Roudabush has done a good job of getting some partners to work with her and finding additional funds of streaming for that organization, to do the things that they want to do as far as even going to national conference.
Right.
I would like to identify some more local business partners within that pathway. If nothing else, the financing would be great, but just to be able to get direct industry feedback for our groups would be an awesome thing for our students. And, if there is a financial perk to it and they would want to sponsor, CTSO opportunities for students, that would be great too.
Right. Especially, I would think these businesses in turn, if it would make these students maybe more employable for them, right?
Yes.
Another question is any particular grants or ways you would want to spend the funds pursued with this?
Well, I mean, with this one, this is the one that has the 3 funding streams. 013 is personnel. And, I had shared with you all that fell off 2 months, which is better than we've done in the past. Since I've been here, we've been dropping about a position each year. This time was just 2 months. However, with the possible addition of a position, we're still starting sort of in a bad spot with that one. 014 is more for sustaining the programs. So, with our, for example, foods classes or supplies that are going to be, consumables, we would get from there. And then, some of the other things that we have talked about would be upgrading some of the computer labs that we have, possibly looking at some dual monitors and some other programs, just because those are, once you have the dual monitors, you do get spoiled to it, and there's a lot of things that you can do and be much more efficient with that. But no, I'm still typically at the start of the semester too, I will meet with the CTE programs, and I keep, list of large ticket items. So as we examine our needs more, we reference back to that list too.
Okay, well, I look forward to what can be done through this, and thank you again.
No, you're very welcome.
Ms. Massey?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can.
I wanted to ask a question. Mr. Rose, are you the only one that is trying to find business partners? Because I know we need more business partners for the CTE students, don't we?
They always help. And, mainly David Martin has a fairly extensive list. And he is adding to that continuously when we start looking at internships. So David is one who pursues those very regularly. And then, of course, we have started our business advisory group. And through the King Chamber of Commerce, I do pursue businesses there. Typically, it's me. I would like to include our teachers in that more in the upcoming year.
Have you had a lot of success finding businesses through the chamber to let students intern?
We have. David has an extensive list, and I'm so glad that he does, because the internship process, there will be, and Ann, correct me if I'm saying this wrong, Ann Sliger, but there will be basically a different code for the internship to be within the pathway program. So we are going to need this extensive list of business partners so that we are getting our students matched up to the internship that they need in that program area.
Do the guidance counselors, do they try to help the student that starts in any of these CTE pathways to make sure that they are able to get theirs by their senior year? Because sometimes I've seen that is lacking. And so who gives the guidance to the student saying you need to sign up for this now if in fact they don't know to?
That should be coming from guidance. When we're talking about the internships and seeking those out, that would come from, David. He does the best that he can to match them to the internship that they need.
And do they need the internship right now to get their credentials?
No, they just need the completer course. So with some of the pathways, they'll have a foundational course, and then they'll have a level 1 and a level 2. There are pathways where they don't have a foundational course. So it would just be a level 1 and a level 2 course.
Okay. Well, anything that would help our graduation rate, I feel like that these students enjoy these CTE classes, that has a big bearing on when they graduate. Some of them can go right into the nursing field with CNA and, just get a job right away, and these other pathways. So anything that helps toward graduation, I think we all need to get behind it. I think we all are, and we certainly appreciate all the work you've done.
Thank you, Ms. Messick. I appreciate y'all as well.
Ms. Tanner?
Thank you for that very thorough report, Mr. Rose, and especially enjoyed hearing what you said about what Mr. Tuttle's been doing with the students going into the lower grades and encouraging them, and surveys for career interest. I'm just very encouraged by that, and personally, I know of the work that Mr. Martin does, and I think he does a fantastic job, and tries to match the students with their potential career options as best he can with our limited businesses in the county. And I know that you have built strong relationships through the Chamber and Rotary and all of those, and I feel like we do have a good relationship with several businesses in the county. So very encouraged by this work and the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I know myself, I was shocked the first time that I saw David Martin's list of who his business partners are that he works with. Another real valuable partner that I can't go without mentioning is Forsyth Tech. They are giving us different options and advancing on the options that we already offer daily. They have provided career coaches, and they are just constantly at the helm waiting for our students. So I appreciate them as well.
I have one more question, if that's okay, Mr. Rogers.
Sure, go ahead.
Mr. Rose, what agriculture partners do you have right off or would be interested in the future? It seems, that's one of the top industries in North Carolina, if that's, a big one for us as well, or?
I know that we have had folks who handle local landscaping to come back and present to students in the past. And I hate to speak to this without having that list in front of me. But I do know that we have students to work with Southern States there in King. We've had students to work with Performance Livestock and Feeds. So we are, we're reaching out to the local folks as much as possible. Those are just a couple.
Okay, thank you. That's just something dear to me with agriculture. If, it seems to be popular, growing, a big industry in our state, opportunities there.
Let me mention Mitchell's Meats too. Carl Mitchell has been a fantastic partner.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
They invited me for a chicken harvesting. To watch the students doing that and to watch their knowledge base was extremely impressive. Mm-hmm. He has been there to do blood draws with the cattle through the chute system that we have set up there. He's a great partner for us, and with the North Carolina Extension Office as well. I know that he stepped back from that, but the Extension Office has been good to us.
Right. And then do you have a high percentage of CTE teachers that do attend the state level professional development that you mentioned early in the presentation?
We do.
Okay, good.
Now this summer they had it slated to be in Winston. However, that has changed and they're going to be doing that virtually. I think that may even serve to increase the number of teachers who attend that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, pending nothing else, Mr. Rose, once again, or Czar Rose, once again. Good job.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, moving on to parent survey drug testing middle school.
Good evening, board members. This is Dr. Taylor. You have in your packet a one-page sheet that basically gives you the numbers. We had 199 responses to this survey, 113 yes, and 86 responded no. So roughly 57% for and 43% against. One thing I would like to mention to you, this of course is not reflected in the updated changes that we've made to the student handbook that was going to be discussed later this evening. It's very straightforward, one question survey, and that's the information we got back. You asked us to try to determine how our stakeholders felt regarding moving drug testing down to the middle school, and these are the results that we were able to obtain. Are there any questions?
Ms. Knight?
One question I had posed, or a concern, I guess, was in the middle school level. I think other board members as well had mentioned concern for tobacco use, and that in this drug testing specifically, it doesn't pick up on that if you go that route, it's a much more expensive test, if I understand or remember. And
that is correct. Yes, ma'am. If you include a nicotine screening, it does cause the cost to go up.
And do you have to pick that from the get-go, or could that be an option, like for
no, ma'am,
upgrade on their test or whatever,
I think what would happen if a parent, my experience has been with these types of tests, we would establish, much like we have already, a strict or a certain panel, certain type of test that would be our regular test. If a parent wanted additional screening, we could put them in touch with the testing company and they could schedule that outside of the regular school setting. But I don't know that we would, based on the contract, kind of have an option of one type of panel versus another. Typically, in these types of programs, once we establish what's being tested, that's fairly consistent unless you as a board, we as a district decide to amend that panel consistently across the board. That's been my experience. But just so you know, we continue to talk with the folks that they're in Insight, if I'm not mistaken, they're in King, Ms. Fowler and her group. We continue to talk with them. I know that Mr. Rose and myself both have talked with her on multiple occasions about how we can address the tobacco cessation, the vaping issue. We continue to search and look for other ways to address that outside of just a testing piece.
Mm-hmm. And on that note, I just think we would need to take a close look at the communication between, the school to, say, Ms. Fowler's group there with Insight, and just being sure that parents and students know all the options and what's offered through them. You know what I mean?
Of course, yes, ma'am.
For the students, and maybe there's a good procedure in place as far as how or when it's appropriate to pass along information to Insight.
Once we have finalized or hammered out what options are available, of course, we will bring those back to you as the board, and whatever you decide for us to do, we will not communicate anything or share anything until that point. But just wanted to let you know that we do continue to talk with them to entertain, to try to determine what options are available to us.
Okay, great. One last thing is a parent or two had reached out to board members once the survey went out, and I think one important piece with parents is going to be just communication on some of the increase. What was the need that initiated this? I mean, sure, some maybe it should be an automatic thought. Okay, we're getting polled on a random drug test. There must be a need. But then other parents, I felt like, were shocked by it and maybe didn't want it, thinking it wasn't necessary, but maybe sharing some statistics or information with them to say, well, in the past year, we've seen X number of incidences with drug or tobacco use in the middle schools, and this has raised or prompted our wanting to drug test and put more information out there to parents and options. You know what I mean?
Yes, ma'am, I do. And if I remember correctly, and Dr. Rice can correct me if I'm wrong, the decision to do the survey first was to try to gauge the interest or to gauge the feeling of our parents, to determine if that was something that they were interested in pursuing before we went any further down the road. So if you as a board decide to pursue this, then yes, ma'am. Dr. Rice, we've talked about a plan of action of how we could share information, how we would communicate information. And if this is something the board decides to do, we will definitely communicate that with our families.
Right. And it was just the fact that I received feedback, like once I explained it and the increase in the numbers, that the parents were more like, okay, I see, it's much more warranted, in their small circle with their student and their group of friends. They felt pretty in tune, and just wasn't sure about the need. But once the big picture was explained on the increase of tobacco and or drug use, it made more sense to them. Again, this is just a handful of parents.
Yes, ma'am. I understand completely. And one thing you as a board discussed and shared with us at an earlier meeting was, if you decide to go to pursue this, we could even entertain focus group type meetings where we could bring folks in, invite folks in, and give them a chance to ask questions, to share data, to have more of an in-depth discussion. So if this is something the board decides to pursue, we have discussed how we could have that or exchange that information with our families.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Ms. Massey?
I did want to ask a question or two. I think the concern is, or one of the concerns that I feel is for the vaping and the juuling. And a lot of that's occurring now, even though we don't want to think about it, in the middle school. And this would not pick up on any of that. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. The way the contract, or the way this was presented to us at this time, would not include vaping and or a nicotine component. We have talked about that with the folks at Insight, but the cost would be quite a bit larger. So we were going to simply, we put out the survey, just drug testing in general, to see what kind of response we would receive from that. But you are correct. The way that our program is currently constituted, we do not test for nicotine and or vaping.
Suppose that a student, suppose that a student was caught with vaping or juuling in the middle school, and we had this program. How would they be dealt with?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, Ms. Messick, in the discussion regarding student handbook, there's a section in there where we're going to talk a little bit about our tobacco cessation program and discuss that. That would fall under that part of the student code of conduct, is how that would be handled. Again, we currently have a program with Insight, and we are continuing to talk with Insight to see how we could make that program better or strengthen that program to address the vaping and or smoking at all of our levels, but especially middle school and high school.
So would it be necessary to vote for the middle school random drug testing? That's kind of a separate thing as to what is in the student handbook. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. This is for This is for the board's information tonight. We were asked to provide or to conduct a survey to find out kind of what the initial thoughts were of our families. We have gathered that information. This is simply for information tonight. Now, please bear in mind that when conversations about the drug testing program started, we were not facing COVID-19. We were not facing the coronavirus issue. So we've had some other things come to the top of the stack, so to speak. But we did want to bring this to you for your information tonight, so we could discuss it. You could ask any questions. And don't want to speak for Dr. Rice, but if this is something that the board does want to pursue, then we will simply need to know that so we can take the next steps. But I'll be honest with you, given the fact that this is June, and as Ms. Knight mentioned earlier, there is a large communication piece to this. Now that we have this information, if the board were to say to me, to Dr. Rice, to the staff, we have this information, but we would like to, wait, maybe get school started and talk about this at another time, another point, we could do that. This is simply for information. But to answer your question, yes, ma'am, we can talk about tobacco cessation separate from the random drug testing program that we're presenting information on right now.
Okay, and one other question. Did the survey go out to middle school parents?
Yes, ma'am. We were able to identify just middle school families, and it was sent out. It was open for 2 weeks. We coordinated with all of our middle school principals, and we met with them. They did a phone call out to all of their families. It was posted on their website. A link was posted on their individual websites, and all of the middle school families were made aware that the survey, that the question was there. Very simple, one question, and the responses. In the beginning, I will say that in the beginning, we had a parameter that there was an issue with the link, but we corrected that by the second day. So we got that cleared up. And early on, the numbers, were fairly steady. Then they picked up more towards the end as more people talked about it, I guess, or were talking about it. And we wound up with 199 responses.
Thank you so much for all the hard work you've done. And I really appreciate you giving all this information so that we can study it and come to a conclusion eventually.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Tedder?
Since we haven't been in school in several months now, what happens with the contract that we have with the current contract we have with Insight? Is it just is the contract such that we aren't being charged with not being in school? Is my first question.
Ms. Tedder, I would need to talk with Mr. Johnson just to make sure, but I would imagine since tests are not being conducted, we would not be charged for those tests. I would have to look at the contract to see is there a base amount in the contract that's not reflective or not reflected in testing. But I could definitely, and I would be willing to sit down with Mr. Johnson and just review that to make sure. But my experience has been these types of contracts are tied directly to the services that the company provides. And since they have not been conducting any tests, we should not be charged much, if anything, during this time.
Okay. And then what has been the feedback from Insight? What is their feeling on a program like this for the middle school? Can you speak to that?
Yes, ma'am. We had a meeting with Ms. Fowler, myself, Dr. Rice, I believe Mr. Rose was there. We had a meeting with Insight back maybe it was in March, not long before the whole COVID-19 became an issue, and we talked about what other districts are doing. I spoke to some of my experience in other districts and how middle school drug testing programs work and have worked. It's kind of a mixed bag. On one hand, it's preventive and it's being proactive, and you have those folks that believe that it is preventive in nature. Then you have others, and to be quite honest with you, there are folks within our district that have some questions that aren't completely comfortable with the possibility of testing middle school students, but I won't speak for them. I will give them a chance or allow them to share their concerns if it gets to that. So it varies. I have worked in districts. I am aware of districts. I have written random drug testing policies for other districts that do include middle school students. Other districts do not include middle school at all. So it's not all over the board, but it's a mixed bag. Some use it and some don't. And Insight kind of spoke to that. They understand why we're looking into this. I will let Mr. Rose and or Dr. Rice add to it if they would like to, but they understand, what we're trying to accomplish, but they're not really pushing one way or the other. They provided information. They provided and discussed what they could provide for us and how they could assist us in this process.
So they didn't encourage or discourage, is what you're saying? Neither.
No, ma'am. I wouldn't really say that they were a proponent or an opponent. We simply invited them in to talk about what options we had, what programs they could provide, and they did that. We had some very good conversation. They talked about what some other districts were doing. They talked about some national trends. But no, ma'am, I would not say they were either pushing for, advocating for, or against. And if Dr. Rice or Mr. Rose wants to add to that, that's my recollection of that conversation.
I would agree with Dr. Taylor that is my recollection as well, is that, you know, while there were some positive tests, there was some counseling with it, it wasn't overwhelming to the point that, wow, this is really meeting a need, we need to do this. But there were positive tests, so it was, you know, but it wasn't overwhelming. So it was kind of like, you know, if you want to do this, we see it, we can do it. If you decide not to do this, we understand that as well. I would say that was very accurate to say that it was a neutral conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, my question is, what are you anticipated the additional cost the district will incur by testing middle schools?
Mr. Rogers, from what we've gathered, it would be a very similar cost to what we're paying right now, which is in the neighborhood, and Dr. Rice, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's in the neighborhood of $8 to $10 per test, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere in that neighborhood. So it's similar cost to what we're paying now. What would happen would be our cost would increase by the number of tests that we conducted. So if you decided as a board, we decide as a district to test a certain percentage, then we could calculate that cost fairly quickly. If it was a set number of tests once a month, once a quarter, etc., we could give you an estimate at that time. We can give you an individual cost per test, but not knowing how many tests or what numbers would be reflected, I did not venture to guess an annual type cost without knowing what the board's thoughts and or feelings would be about the number of tests that would be conducted.
If we ran a similar program to the high school, we're talking about an $8,000 to $10,000 increase in our drug testing expense.
Okay. Because my concern. Go ahead.
And that's just a ballpark with talking with Ms. Fowler about, because there would be some increase in the classes that they may have to offer if people were testing positive, and the test and all that is we were looking in that $8,000 to $10,000 would be the probability of it, unless we went on a ramped up version or a real scaled down version that could affect it one way or the other. But if a similar type program was held, it would be in that ballpark.
Right. I mean, I don't think it's going to be as widespread as the high schools, because I don't think we have the amount of student athletes or participants. But the other concerning factor to me is it sounds like not even 50% of the parents want it from what we have seen. We're at 57%, so 43% don't want it. That's not.
Well, Mr. Rogers, you're correct. Of the 199 responses that we received, while it's not 50-50, it's within the error, if you would, of you really, as the board, in my opinion, this information justifies for or against. I mean, you really could advocate one way or the other based on the similarity of these numbers. Now, just to give you some other numbers real quick, we have, as of our 8th month PMR, we have, if you include 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, we have 1,376 students in our district, if I'm doing my math correct. If you just included 7th and 8th graders, there are 916 across our district. So that'll kind of give you an idea of, now I have no way of knowing of these 199 responses, did some families go in and mom and dad both take the survey? That's possible. But that's just to kind of give you a point of reference. But you're right. You don't have an overwhelming for or against. And Mr. Rogers, given the fact that you ask about budget, we also know this is a very difficult budget year. It's going to be a difficult budget year. So we didn't know how that would play into this decision at this time as well.
Right. Okay. Any further questions? Any further questions from the board?
Participation in the testing. Is it strictly athletes, or how do other students get pulled in for testing?
What I can tell you, Ms. Knight, is since students do not have the ability to drive at the middle school level, this testing program would be strictly athletics and or extracurricular activities. Or a parent or a family, I would imagine, like at the high school, they could opt into the program if they chose to do so.
Because also, again, just one parent's input was that a lot of times with your athletes, you're kind of targeting sometimes the wrong group in some instances. You're not getting or reaching maybe some of the ones that may need the help even more.
Well, I have heard that as well, but I will tell you a counter argument to that is that if testing is present at the middle school level and young people grow accustomed to the testing program, it may actually keep someone from venturing down a path as they get older because they are used to the testing, they've been tested, and it gives them an out, if you will, because of the testing. But you're exactly right. I have heard that argument as well. But at the middle school level, the way statutorily, we can only require this of extracurricular activities and athletics. So it just doesn't lend itself at the middle school level to wind up testing a large group. And, for example, Piney Grove Middle School, let's say it has 250 students. Of those, say 100 of them participate in extracurricular activities of some sort, then that would be, the sample there at Piney Grove. Chestnut Grove, much larger middle school, much larger pool of young people in extracurricular. They would have a larger pool to pull from. So all of that will be worked out in detail if the board decides to pursue this and you say to us, we would like to do a percentage, we would like to do a set number. There's a lot of different ways we could approach this if you decide to pursue this.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything additional, Ms. Messick or Ms. Tatter?
No further questions. Thank you.
Okay. The only thing I'll add is the athlete we're trying to discourage or use this as a potential reason to discourage use is also if they're an athlete in 7th grade and 8th grade, they're going to be an athlete in 9th grade typically, knowing that the drug testing is coming. So I'm not sure. I mean, that light at the end of the tunnel is going to be there whether we light the whole tunnel or not. So
I understand.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you, Dr. Taylor.
I wanted to add something real quick.
Okay.
I'm glad we're going to have, or if we would do this, the opt-in option to the program, because I can tell you based on personal experience that I have had phone calls from parents in the past of former students who asked, how do I get my child drug tested? I need help. I need somewhere to start, and this is how they did it. They were through the school, their child got help because of this program. So just wanted to throw that in.
Well, and I'll wrap up my portion by saying I don't want to speak for Dr. Rice, of course, or the board. I would imagine the program would be very similar, if not identical, as close as could be to our current program at the high school level. So if the board decides to pursue this, we will work to put together a plan of action, and I will simply wait to hear back from Dr. Rice and the board as how you choose to proceed.
Okay. But do you think it is too late to actually implement it for the fall?
Mr. Rogers, if you're asking me my opinion, if this were a typical year, I'm confident that we could make this work for fall. And I'm not saying we can't make it work for fall now, but given all of the other issues that we're going to be dealing with and just trying to get school started in general, if you're asking me my personal opinion, it would be very difficult, but I will never say that we couldn't do something, that we can't do something, but it would be much easier if this were a typical year, but this is anything but a typical year. And that's just kind of what we're facing right now.
And I would echo that a change like this, again, in a typical year would be doable. We would try to host some town hall type meetings if people are interested to kind of find out why, what it would look like, all of that type of thing. But right now, I don't know that a virtual meeting, even though these Google Meets will hold 250 people, would be the right way to do that. And having lost touch with our school face-to-face back in March, and not sure how we're going to see them again in the fall, I think it would be a very difficult transition this summer. I mean, we can do it if you want to do it, and we can certainly use the paper and our website and videos to try to educate people and make it work. But I think it would be somewhat problematic to try to implement it before August 17th.
And Mr. Rogers, to expand on that answer, it may be better received one way or the other if parents were not dealing with so many other issues right now, again, with just trying to get back to school and worried about the social and emotional well-being and the physical well-being with all of the things that parents and families and students are going to be dealing with. So that's something that may need to be taken into consideration as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Moving on, engagement survey.
Yes, sir. This is Melissa Jessup speaking. Good evening, board and administration. The engagement survey, I sent you a link, a YouTube link presentation by Mr. Ryan Jolly, the representative with Qualtrics Company. And I'm going to just briefly summarize that presentation for you and then see what questions you have and then talk about maybe some next steps with you. First of all, they did make the survey a bit more personalized, beginning with the introduction. It welcomes the employee that would be logging in to take the survey by their name. It also looks at the supervision hierarchy and customizes it for the correct supervisor, and the location. Our logo is also included. And then it drills into questions that deal with trust, satisfaction about their job, just general engagement with their employment and the work environment. It also gets into another area that's probably very timely with the coronavirus and how that has impacted our nation as a whole, and certainly our school district, in terms of how employees are doing, those type questions. It also, beyond just general questions, it gets into what our employees value most about working at Stokes County School District. And also will ask for their feedback on 2 to 3 things that Stokes County Schools could do to improve the work environment. So there would be some district level questions as well as drilling down to some site location questions. I am scheduled to meet with the rep I've been working with, as well as the individual who will be dealing with the technical side of things, setting up the database and creating all of that behind the scenes to run this survey. And I'll be glad to answer any questions or take feedback that you have additionally that I can share with the Qualtrics group.
Okay, Ms. Knight.
Did you say at the end it compiles this data for the
Yes.
board to review?
Yes, Mrs. Knight, it would compile that data for the board's review.
And then once it goes out, what's the turnaround time?
Generally, setting it up the first time around can take up to 10 weeks. They would try to push up that timeline as quickly as possible, but I think realistically, anywhere from 8 to 10 weeks. I will know more when I talk with them Wednesday.
Okay, so you'll just update us later this week?
Yes, ma'am. I will be glad to send you all an email.
Okay, I did watch the gentleman's presentation through your link, and that was helpful, and I appreciate that. And I don't have any other questions right now. Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome, Mrs. Knight.
Ms. Messick.
Maybe you could circle back to me, okay?
Okay, Ms. Tanner.
I really want to know, Mr. Rogers, what is your intention with this survey right now, as far as trying to get it out to our staff for this school year? You know, we're getting down here to the short roads for our teachers, so just want to know what you would want to do with this right now.
I mean, if at all possible, if we can get the survey complete, we'll get it out to the staff. If not, we need to get it ready for the following year. Right now we're under COVID, so I'm not sure how much interaction people are having and how they can truly justify it. But mine is but one opinion.
Well, that's. I just wanted to know what the other board members thought about this, and as far as having it out this year, if that was what, when we first started talking about it, of course it was, but then who knew what could have transpired when we first discussed this. So I'm just don't know exactly where to go from here for this school year, but I don't want to not do this. We've made really good progress in forming the survey, and I think the feedback is critical to get. Don't know that it would be completely fair or the quality of feedback we would get with such a strange school year. So still want to pursue it, but timing just might have to be adjusted on base or different from what we originally thought.
Okay. I mean, send it out, Ms. Jessup, and then we can look at it. We'll discuss it again. Like I think you're understanding, timing is not as critical as a non-COVID year would have been. Right.
And Mr. Rogers and board, if it in fact takes up to 10 weeks to get it rolling with the databases and building all that behind the scenes, it may then realistically be August before it would be ready to roll.
Right. Okay.
I'll keep you updated, and I think any other questions? I know Mrs. Messick maybe has something.
Ms. Messick?
Well, that's what I was thinking, that with this year ending like it has, and I just don't see that it would be fair to ask people to fill out a survey when they haven't been in school themselves. And I just feel like it'd be more fair to probably use it at another time. But since we have gotten these people, Qualtrics, to make the survey, I think that we do need to use it. So I thank you, Miss Jessup, for all the hard work you've done. And if you'll just send out, the information you had said, maybe we can decide on a date to use it.
I'll be happy to. Thank you, Mrs. Messick.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. 2020-2021 draft student handbook.
All right, board members. I'm going to walk through these fairly quickly. There's only a couple that I want to highlight for you going through. As you see, the student handbook revisions listed out from the front cover down through page 12 is just updating information with new hires, wording, not really major changes within that portion. On page 24, each year we do get approval from the board for our school fees. We would like to present to you the possibility of adding an elementary Chromebook insurance fee. We were hoping to go with $10 pending your approval on that. As we are moving into these remote learning plans, our elementary students will have computers, not necessarily carrying them home every day, but we will have one designated for each student. Continuing down, pages 29 through 31, we have had our school nurses to update that information for us. On page 38, that was dealing with MTSS. We have streamlined that process thanks to Ms. McGee on working on the guidelines with Stokes County and rewriting, taking items from other districts, and just building a good plan for us there. The one from the state was sort of overwhelming, and so by making it more directly related to Stokes County, it just will work better and not be that overwhelming length for the parents. Continuing down, we removed a sentence about soft drinks that banned them from the cafeteria, mainly because we do sell those within our high schools. Then there was wording and updates added. Page 77 is where I know the elementary fee is something we want to talk about, and then probably pages 77 through 79. As I discussed before, we split tobacco and juuling into two separate policies. We maintained our tobacco cessation class, and in discussion with Terry Fowler, we are also looking at the vaping cessation class, and it has a little more information within it to increase the length of that class. Also, I'd had conversations with Derek Vickers. Derek has already given basically a presentation that we can use within in-school suspensions when those occur based on the first offense with the vaping. And it's also something that when I shared that with principals, I'd had one to reach out and ask if that could also be used in the health classes. And so I think the more resources and the more we educate our students, the better off we are in terms of preventing the vaping and nicotine usage. Then moving down, we will be updating the testing calendar. And then when you look through the other changes that are listed, those are mainly just new information for the year with eligibility guidelines for income, and then changing school years and due dates and things of that nature. So board members, I know you probably do want to discuss the insurance fee and probably information on the juuling or anything else that you see here. So I'll just open up and wait for your feedback.
Okay, Miss Knight.
How did the pages 78 and 79 changed the most compared to last year? Is it the discipline piece or just pulling that out separately?
It was more in separating the two and then creating it to be more specific to the offense. When you look at the juuling and vaping, students don't really see that that is bad for you. But so by working with Terry and Derek with Insight, I think we're going to be able to get a class that is much more directly related to vaping and those offenses, and educate the students more effectively to get them to stop and recognize the health consequences of these actions.
Okay, and we may have spoke before. Is this highly incorporated into like health and PE classes?
It is, and we are sharing resources. Again, Derek Vickers had been to a conference in DC and shared those resources with me. The Catch My Breath resource was really good. I went ahead and shared that with our health teachers, also with the presentation that Derek has put together. We are constantly looking for resources and ways to increase the information that we're giving our students, because I know Ms. Messick had mentioned earlier how often this is occurring. I don't know that students do realize how bad for you this is. A lot of students see this as a safe alternative to cigarettes, and it's not. And I think that's a big part of our job with these policies, is to make sure that we educate them so they are making much more informed decisions and choosing the right options for their health.
Also, our options for parents printing some of this material online or any of the forms and things that are due back. We did create a link. Is that correct?
Yes, we have had that, and I'll make sure that we do get those up and running again if they have not already been.
And then also, what changed with page 105, the eligibility guidelines, income eligibility?
Yes, that is just, we're waiting on the update for free and reduced lunch eligibilities. That typically gets updated annually. And Lisa, if I'm misspeaking on that, please correct me.
It's once a year. It'll come out probably about the end of July.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all, Mr. Rose. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, Miss Messick.
Well, I'm really glad to see that we have taken the juuling and the vaping and put it in a separate category, because I do feel like that a lot of students that are vaping, their parents don't know. And the way that they have the things that they use, the jewels that they use, some of the vaping now is, you don't see it. And a child can actually, or a student can actually blow it up their sleeve or in their shirt. And, this happening a whole lot at schools. And I don't know what a lung will look like if you start vaping in the middle school and say you're 14 and you vape till you're in your 20s. You might think that you're doing okay because you're not smoking a cigarette. But I think that the studies have found that vaping is harmful to your lungs. So if we can save some students and help them to not damage their lungs, I feel like that this would be a very important thing for us to try to do at schools. Also, the consequences of the vaping, I feel like will maybe deter some once they see that their parent eventually would have to meet with the drug counselors. So that's after several offenses, of course. But I do feel like that that may be something that would deter them because they wouldn't want to have to meet with their parents at Insight. So I just hope that this will help in some way. It's not, I know students look at this as a punishment, but honestly, I feel like that if it could deter students from vaping in any way, that it would just help them in the long run. So I thank you for that.
Oh, absolutely.
About the $10 for the elementary, I feel like that's a reasonable request because a lot of students, you know, you have to be responsible. Their parents do when they take the Chromebooks home, and this would be a very low cost. And so I do feel like that $10 I feel like is reasonable, and I'm sure there'd be some scholarships or monies for people who couldn't afford that, but I feel like that $10 is a reasonable request for the elementary school.
Thank you.
Ms. Tanner?
I just want to say that I am very pleased with the collaboration that you had with school staff and the handbook committee that you formed, Mr. Rose. Thank you for that. I feel that that was much needed and a very positive step forward in collaborating and getting feedback from the people who see these issues every day. So thank you for that. And I too, like Ms. Messick said, am very encouraged with the proactive steps we will be taking toward the vaping issue through the disciplinary process here. And Ms. Messick, they do show, you know, the use of these vapes. I don't know how many years worth of this, but it doesn't take long to destroy the development of a youth lung with this. And Mr. Vickers' presentations have some graphics about that. And so I'm really encouraged that we're going to be bringing some more formal programs into the health classes. So just overall, thank you very much for the work on this. I appreciate it. And as far as the $10 fee for the Chromebooks, I feel also that that's a very reasonable cost, and it will help cover us because elementary students accidents happen with these. And as a parent, I'd be willing to pay that $10 for the insurance rather than having to cover the cost to replace it for a new one. So I think that is very reasonable. And with the high probability that more distance learning will occur, that's a step in the right direction for this right now, this time. Thank you.
Thank you. And what you said about the committee, I appreciate your comments there. It is very difficult when you look at getting a consensus from folks. And, you know, some of the recommendations that come through, it may just be a matter of how we're enforcing the policy rather than changing the policy. But I do think we had good discussion and reached consensus on a lot of things that day. So thank you for the feedback.
Okay, then it's up to me, and I'm going to echo the sentiments. I'm not going to go on about it because I know everybody's heard it, but great job. I appreciate the collaboration between everybody and everybody's hard work and input. So, and $10 is a whole lot cheaper than a Chromebook. So, and we are dealing with elementary, and things happen. Having two of my own that could destroy anything. So, well, one could. All right. And then discussion on virtual learning plan.
All right, board members, I had shared a survey with you today, and I would have had that to you sooner, but this is something that I think we we need to talk about and jump on to get feedback from our parents. We are going to be required to create a district remote plan that is going to be due July 20th. There are components in that plan. These are two separate things, but there are components within that plan where we will have to survey parents. And then in light of what school may look like next year, we really need to hear what our parents are looking for to find out their expectations, their level of comfort with their students returning to our buildings. And I think it's going to be imperative that as we look forward, we take that feedback and try to match up the options that we as a school system offer to meet the needs of the parents and the families that we serve. So, like I said, I had emailed you that parent survey today. I would love to get approval to go ahead and collect that feedback. We do have districts who are looking at, virtual plans around us and setting up virtual academies. And I think it's going to be important that we go ahead and start those discussions and find what our parents' expectations and wants for Stokes County schools would be.
And board, I'd just like to add on to that and say, as this COVID-19 has drug on and the phases have not happened as fast as we kind of thought they may have, and maybe the phases didn't release as much as we thought they may have the first go around. There's a real concern that in the fall, people may say, we want to send our kids back to school, but we don't want to do it on day one. We want to wait and see how everybody else does. Or maybe at the end of the first semester, we'll send our kids back to school. Or maybe there are some that are in such fear of this or have the health concerns in their family where they're like, we really need to continue this virtual learning. And the more we talked about it here as the district level, we realized that we needed to start preparing for that reality that may happen. But every time we started discussing it, especially when you get into course offerings and staffing, it always came back to how many are we talking about? Are we talking about 5? Are we talking about 20? Are we talking about 50? Are we talking about 1,000? And so it's impossible to plan if we don't know the scope of what we're doing. And so that's why, Mr. Rose has done a great job, I believe, with creating that survey, revising some that others have sent out, kind of making sure we ask the questions we wanted to ask. And we would like to send that out for a couple of weeks so that we know what we're looking at. I mean, if we get back 2 responses of people that say, yeah, we need something, that's a lot different than if we have 300. And if the 2 are high school kids, well, we won't even break a sweat. If it's 50 kindergartners, I think we're all sweating. But we also realize that we got to roll up our sleeves and do some work. And so we've discussed this with district administration. We've discussed this with our principals. And every time we have, it's always come back to, well, what's the scope we're looking at? And so that's why we're requesting to be able to send out this survey for a couple of weeks to kind of gauge the interest of our community on. And again, if there are homeschoolers, if there are charter school parents that want to fill out this survey, and it will be open to all. If you are in Stokes County and you want your child to have the opportunity to do this, then we want to know about it.
Okay. Miss Knight?
Has the state given you all any guidelines for returning to school yet?
Well,
they have shared the CDC guidance. There is a local regional reentry task force. There's a state reentry task force. But every time that we start pressing, the side conversations come back that we may get more guidance than actual rules. And so we have actually started here in our district, looking at what those may be, getting those roughed out. Then we're going to meet with our nurses, have them look at it, get with our health department and EMS, emergency services, to look at it in case there is an absence of guidance from the state as we get closer to the start of the school year. So, but we have not received any guidance at this time from the state.
And the
Okay.
only thing I was going to add about the feedback was that we do have webinars this week to talk about the remote learning plans, that we will have to submit, but, nothing along these lines. Really, this is more talking about the 5 remote days and what components are required from legislation with the Senate and House bills that came out.
Okay, so no discussion of like potential schedule changes or anything like that. That would maybe come in the next month or so.
Yes, ma'am. I think a lot of that has to depend on what phase we're in, what those phases mean. And to be honest, I don't think they've got it figured out yet.
And if I recall, school cannot reopen until phase 3. Is that correct?
The last governor's order said that education was exempt from the mass gatherings, but not the other restrictions in place. And right now we're scheduled for phase 3 to tentatively begin June 26th. If he follows his pattern, the 23rd or the 24th, we will find out what that looks like. We have, State Superintendent Johnson has made a lot of press conferences where he has made statements about staggered days, staggered weeks, staggered daily schedules. But there has been no guidance and no, this is what this will look like on this date yet. We've not received anything other than speculation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
All right, Ms. Bassick.
Well, it seems odd to me that they would want schools to give all that they're going to do in the 5 remote days as early as July the 20th, when they haven't even given guidelines as to how the schools will operate when they start August the 17th. So it's really hard, I'm sure, to try and get these 5 remote days. They won't be at the beginning of the year, will they? Doesn't that happen later on, maybe in the spring?
Well, according to the law, they cannot be before August 24th. So that first week, as it stands right now, again, it would nearly be impossible to start back day 1 remotely when you have to give out Chromebooks and meet your teachers and know what subjects you're taking. But we also, again, don't know what we're going to be facing on August 17th. But there is talk that we may do remote learning until October possibly. But again, that's all speculation. Nothing has come down as official guidance, official word, until we know what phase we're in and what that phase actually means. But the remote learning document that we're talking about, that is something locally that they have given us. Mr. Rose, is it 13 guidelines?
Yes, sir.
There are 13 sections of that plan that they want us to fill out that says how we will do remote learning on those 5 days. It won't be specific to what will you do on that day, but how will you do it on those days. And so, and again, they say they're going to send out a template for that soon. And there's some webinars coming up, and we have some time until that's due. But more of the concern for myself and all of the superintendents in the state, as well as this team here in Stokes County, is what's August 17th going to look like, and when are we going to find that out so that we can make those plans?
Well, I tell you, that's I appreciate all the hard work that you're doing to try to implement this virtual learning plan and get it sent off. And I wish you a lot of, the best of luck on that, because actually you're just trying to work into the future, and we don't really know what that is. And the state is asking us to predict, and they don't even know what it'll be like, right?
That's correct. Dr. Taylor has put in several hours. I've put in several hours working. Mr. Goins has been, a lot of people have been working. And we're trying to create some guidelines for us that we can live with. But we may put in, a combined 200 hours of work. And then one, day the state may say, okay, this is what you got to do. And we throw out all the work that we've done. At the same time, we're kind of being told it's really going to be left up to us, but they won't tell us that now. And if we wait until they tell us that, then we might not have time to finalize everything and get the supplies we need. This is a very frustrating time, I will admit. And again, we're basically 54 days away from school starting back again when you take out the weekends.
Well, I appreciate all the work you've done, and thank you.
Ms. Tedder?
Yes, let me just get this straight. So this survey that you gave us, Mr. Rose, this was something that the district just came up with and decided that that's what you want to do? It wasn't a mandate to do that?
Well, yes and no. When you look at the 13-step plan, or the 13 parts of this plan, the very first one is consulting with stakeholders. So even if we do not choose to do a virtual option for our families, when it comes down to these remote learning days, we still have to have that consultation with our stakeholders through the survey. And then we also for step 4 is also surveying student and teacher home connectivity. That's why I put that connectivity question as well.
Well, I'm very pleased with the survey, or the concept of the survey, and I'm looking forward to getting the feedback from the parents and other stakeholders, because I think it's a good idea for that. But I just thought maybe there would be I've got a couple more questions, and then a couple of maybe suggestions on questions to possibly add. I want to know or a percentage of paper packets that were picked up versus online submittals. Did we have any idea of that at this point, or we could just get that from the survey? And it's adding another question. Did your student get paper packets, or did they do all of their distance learning or all their work via computer, or was there a combination? What would parents feel would be most helpful? I think maybe a combination, if possible, could be helpful with some students, not all, because some might be very comfortable and proficient with the online platforms, and this is mainly for the younger grades, but some might feel more intimidated by that and would feel more comfortable with a combination of options. Yeah. And so maybe adding that as a question. And then
Ms. Tedder, I don't think I'm sorry.
Are we going to be limited in different application choices? I've heard from other districts that they can't do Google Classroom next year, that they have to transition to Canvas, or are there going to be limitations on our teachers in that aspect? And if so, maybe add a question on there. What what applications worked best for your student? What did you feel the most encumbered by? Might be useful to get some feedback there.
Dr. Wright,
And
correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe the platform is a district decision, and we can choose Canvas, we can choose Google Classroom, or a combination of both.
And that is correct. And I don't consider if we were even considering trying to educate a kid full time for the school year using packet work. I think it would have to be digital format to get real time feedback with kids. I know that we've had some that had to do that this spring, but I'll defer that to the curriculum experts. But that would seem very difficult to me to be able to guarantee a quality education with just packet work for an entire school year, especially in the lower grades. But really all of them.
Well, and looking at the remote, for the remote learning days, especially with K2 and Miss McGee, feel free to speak to that. But in K2, I can see with these remote learning days, the possibility of using the packet. But yeah, I agree with you, Dr. Rice. We need connectivity if this is a long-term plan.
A couple other things are the platforms, especially if we don't go back to school to begin with, are the platforms going to be drastically different when they transition from elementary to middle or middle to high? And if there's something that the student's not familiar with, how are we going to teach them?
I'll be honest, as far as with these students are digital natives and they can rotate between these platforms really, without an issue. I know that North Stokes and South in particular use Canvas heavily. Google Classroom seemed to have been a preference, in other spots. And we still had some other platforms, but as far as the access within and teaching students to use it, they're extremely user friendly. I didn't see that as a blocking or sticking point for anyone, and other members can feel free to chime in as well.
Well, and again, if the scope is what will determine this. If we're talking about 5 kids, we can meet one-on-one with somebody, walk through how we're going to do this and make it work. If it is 1,000 kids, we've got a much different job ahead of us in making sure people are comfortable with it, setting up tutorials on how to use those things. That's why this survey is it is hanging over our heads right now, because until we know what scope we're talking about, it's very hard to make a plan that will be effective.
And back to one point you made, I think you brought it up. I'm not sure which one of you brought it up. I think maybe Dr. Rice, about that you would open this up to not just our current public school students, but invite homeschoolers and charter school students to fill out this survey. But then you would have to you'd have to alter the questionnaire to include an option there. Are you currently one of those students? But I would like the option or the outreach possibility, to get some feedback from those populations to see if we could attract them if we are going to be digitally learning for any length of time. So I appreciate that.
So on the first question, I could just add a column for other and allow them to fill in if they were homeschool or charter school or another private school option.
Right. And then I would be interested in, because I got a list of, like, from an elementary school, like when digital learning first was sent out, I saw the list of all the applications. and it was a lot. And, you know, it was a lot for parents to have to download those onto their computers or whatever. And students enjoyed some, I'm sure, over the other. So just getting to weed out the ones that weren't as user friendly would be beneficial, I would think. Just my thoughts on the subject there, but I appreciate the survey overall, and if you could just make a couple of those changes there, I think you're good to go with that. Look forward to the feedback.
Good, thank you, Ms. Tanner. I look forward to seeing what's coming. It may, as I've had discussions, it's going to force us into the next evolution of education. So the further out in front of it we get, the better we ride the wave. So let's make Stokes County proud. All right. And then that moves us on to H, which
This discussion of school nutrition grants.
yeah, my writing was so bad that my elementary student teacher would not like me much. Okay.
All right, this is Lisa. I just wanted to let you all know of a couple of grants that we have received in the last couple of weeks. The first one is from the Dairy Alliance for $4,000. We can use it for coolers and carts, anything that will help us get the food out on the sidewalk, signs for advertisement, and things like that. Then I received the one from the equipment grant that I applied for back in January. We got it for Poplar Springs Elementary for $13,393 for a combi oven, which is a mixture between an oven, an air fryer, and a steamer. So it will take the place of the steamer that they have. So I just wanted to let y'all know that we had received those grants.
Ms. Knight?
No, I'm happy to hear that we're receiving these funds and can put it to good use. Thank you, Ms. Dillon.
Thank you.
Ms. Messick?
Miss Dillon, I'm so glad you got those grants. I know that will be very helpful for your program. I also want to say that your team of cafeteria staff has done an outstanding job with all the lunches and the breakfasts that you sent out throughout the county. How many have you sent out now?
As of last week, it was, what was it, Dr. Rice? A little over 200,000. So we're probably about 220,000 now.
It's unbelievable, and I am amazed at how much food has been sent out. And are you still having people who are willing to work?
Oh, yes. We've got a good group. Really, the ones that started with us back in March are willing to stay for the rest of the time.
And how long will that be?
Well, right now we are going till the 31st of June, and we're going to reevaluate. But we are, as long as people are coming, the state has approved us to go until school starts on August 17th.
Oh my goodness.
So we just got to get the word out to get, the families that we're still here.
Do you have new people, or is it the same kind of people every time?
What do you mean, the people coming?
Same families, or do you have new people that come that you hadn't been feeding before?
I think we have a lot of the same families who come because the workers kind of know them as the cars are getting close. They already know how many bags to get together. I'm sure we probably get some new ones. I know we had somebody call today who, you know, was saying they didn't have enough food for their family and all this stuff. And Regina had talked to them, and she asked them, she said, well, y'all going, you know, picking up meals? And they hadn't done that yet. So unfortunately, there's still people out there, I guess, that just doesn't realize, or so she was encouraging them to go ahead and go.
Well, it's just a tremendous effort that you have made, and we appreciate it. And I know the community appreciates it. And most of all, food is getting to the children of our county, and I just applaud you for that.
Thank you.
Ms. Tedder?
I second the praises verbalized by Ms. Messick. I think that you all have done an outstanding job, and it is amazing that you were able to adapt and evolve so quickly to that and provide for so many that are in need in our county. And I'm glad to hear that it can go on for the extended, well, through June, and then possibly the rest of the summer. So that's good for so many students. And just thank you for everything that you and your staff have done, Ms. Dillon. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
The only thing I'm going to add is anytime money's coming in, great. And the fact that your staff is feeding that many people, I'll put our staff against anybody in the nation. It's remarkable. Okay, thank you, Ms. Dillon.
Go ahead.
All right, approval of federal fund budget amendment number 6. I think we're about to hear from Ms. Lynette Moore.
Yes, you have that amendment. It's just increasing your federal allotment for our IDEA Title VI grant for $1,187. We just received some additional revenue from the state.
Any discussion? Pending no discussion, I'll take a motion to approve.
I make a motion to approve the budget amendment number 6. This is Pat Messick.
Thank you, Ms. Messick. Do I have a second?
I will second that motion. Katie Tedder.
Thank you, Ms. Tedder. Ms. Knight, how so do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Messick?
Aye.
Ms.
Aye.
Tedder?
Aye.
And it's unanimous, Pam. Moving on. Teacher contracts for Mount Olive. Any discussion? I'll take a motion to approve.
I make a motion to approve the teacher contracts for Mount Olive. This is Pat Messick.
Thank you, Ms. Messick. Do I have a second?
I will second that. Katie Tedder.
Thank you, Ms. Tedder. Ms. Knight, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Messick?
Aye.
Ms. Tedder?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Okay, personnel report minus Piney Grove addition of a P and football coach. Do I have a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve the personnel report. Cheryl Knight.
Thank you, Ms. Knight. Do I have a second?
I second Pat Messick.
Thank you, Ms. Messick. Ms. Knight, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Messick?
Aye.
Ms. Tedder?
Aye.
Unanimous. Piney Grove physical education teacher and head football coach. Do I have a motion to approve?
This is Pat Messick. I make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Ms. Messick. Do I have a second?
I will second that. Katie Tedder.
Thank you, Ms. Tedder. Ms. Knight, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Messick?
Aye.
Ms. Tedder?
Aye.
Chairman Rogers has abstained. And it's that is D, and E is King Elementary doors. Do I have a motion to approve the recommendation of Mr. Goins?
I make a motion to approve the recommendation of Mr. Goins for the King Elementary doors. This is Pat Messick.
Thank you, Ms. Messick. Do I have a second?
I will second that. Katie
Thank you, Ms.
Tedder.
Thank you, Ms. Tedder. Ms. Knight,
Aye.
Ms. Messick,
Aye.
Ms. Tedder.
Aye.
That one's unanimous. Announcement, information and announcements.
Board members, you have in your packet the upcoming board meeting dates. June 15th is a 6 p.m. meeting. Please remember that July the 6th is currently scheduled as an 8:30 a.m. meeting, and July 20th, you will go back to a 6 p.m. meeting. We have also included in your packet the updated calendar for the 2020-2021 school year for both the traditional calendar and the early college. That's all that I have unless you have any questions.
Okay, any questions from the board?
Chairman Rogers, I do have one question about the last part of the agenda. We are scheduled to have, if we follow our normal pattern of first and third Mondays, the next work session would be July 6th. Not our next meeting, but the next work session would be July 6th. This is one of those odd years where the 4th of July falls on the weekend, and it is Saturday, and so I didn't know if that would be problematic for the board to meet on the 6th. That's our regularly scheduled day, or if you would like to move that to the 13th, which would move the board meeting to the 27th, or if you wanted to, how you wanted to look at that with the 4th of July as it is. And if you want to meet on the 6th, that is fine, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Or
Okay,
if you
board,
want
do y'all have anything?
or next meeting would be fine too.
Right. Why don't we wait till the next meeting and we can decide if we need to have it? I don't really want to move it to the 13th and the 28th because that overlaps with the commissioners' meetings. Typically in July, we don't have a lot going on, but this is a COVID year, so we may. So let's wait 2 weeks, see where we sit, and then I'll make that determination with the consent of the board as to whether we move it forward, backwards, or just hold it where it's at. Is that okay with the board?
Yes, sir.
That sounds like a good plan.
Okay, great. Any other comments before we adjourn? Okay, and at this point, we'll take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion. Cheryl Knight.
All right, thank you, Ms. Knight. Do I have a second?
I will second it, Katie Tedder.
All right, thank you, Ms. Tedder. Ms. Knight, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Messick? Ms. Tedder?
Aye.
Okay. That's we are officially adjourned. I want to thank you all for your participation. We got through this pretty quickly, and it was almost flawless. I am impressed. Thank you, staff, for all you're doing. We appreciate you from the bottom of our hearts.
Yes, thank you. And Mr. Rogers, you're getting the hang of this really well. Good job.
I'm trying. It took three computers and a cell phone to get through closed session, but open session was flawless.
It went well. Thank you.
And board, we
Have a great
certainly
night.
appreciate your support during this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Have a good evening. Everybody be safe.
All right.
Thank you.